This is the Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for joining us.
Well, hello, Austin. Thank you for joining us today with Investor Connect. I understand you're the investment manager for Bay Angels, and it sounds like you have a great group there. Can you give us a little bit more background about yourself and the group?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thanks for having me on. Pleasure to be here. Background on Bay Angels. So we were founded in 1998 by a man named Roger King. He still operates as our founder / CEO. He's most well known for also being CEO of a HR talent sourcing company called Chief People. And shortly after he started the group, he brought on Kareem Narani, who's a very experienced investor in the field, lots of knowledge, lots of domain expertise. And essentially what the purpose of Bay Angels is to bring the two sides of the investment ecosystem together, right? Bring in the founders and have them meet with investors. And we find that there's a lot of need on both sides of the coin. The entrepreneurs and founders are really looking to get in touch and contact with investors, and the investors are looking for high-quality deals and profitable opportunities for themselves. So that's kind of the purpose of the group. And more recently, we brought on Jordan Wabe, who's heading up our operations right now. And together they kind of lead the strong team that we have of about 10 to 20 people working on this. So we do everything nurturing startups through our due diligence process, to pitch events, to partnering with other events to do similar types of networking, cooperation events in the area.
So what's your criteria for deals that you want to accept into your program? What do deals have to achieve to get into your process?
Absolutely. So we're a generalist. So as far as industry or vertical goes, we don't necessarily have one specific one that we look at like a lot of funds do. We do focus on the seed round, though. Seed, bridge. We are looking to venture into Series A, but that'll probably be down the road a little bit as we expand and the business grows. So right now we stick to seed and bridge, And there are a couple of items that we don't necessarily consider from companies. So, for example, if a company is heavy hardware, say robotics or something like that, we would much rather invest in the AI software behind the robotics than the actual manufacturing of the robotics itself. So we don't do heavy manufacturing. We also try and steer clear of anything that needs FDA approval, as we don't have much experience in that space on our team. And that makes it difficult for us to really evaluate the potential success of the companies that come through our door. We look mostly at tech, but we'll look anywhere from IoT to fintech to agricultural technology to medtech, really a broad range of verticals.
Do you have any preference on geography, just local companies, or anyone from across the U.S. or across the world?
Yeah, so most of our investor base is in the U.S., and the Bay Area specifically. So we'd like to have the companies have some sort of Bay Area presence, whether they have a satellite office out here or whether they're out in the Bay fairly frequently. But we are building relationships both internationally and domestically. We just signed a partnership with a great fund out of St. Louis. We have a lot of connections in the MENA region, specifically the Dubai area. So we do look at international companies, but in order to be considered for our pitch events, which all take place in the Bay Area, we do require that you have some sort of presence here. But that's not the only way to get in touch with our investors. So we send out monthly updates of the top companies that we see, and those can be global, so really from any region.
Okay. And when you write checks for a certain company, what's the average investment you guys are making?
So it depends on our angel investors, right? Because they invest individually. Bay Angels is not a fund yet. We are looking at that on our roadmap, but that's again another long-term goal. But our investors, like I said, invest individually, and they'll write checks anywhere from $25,000 to $250,000 is what we've seen. So we see a wide range of funding amounts. I'd say probably our average gets close to maybe 80 to 100K.
Okay, that makes sense. And so you've been working with this group for some time. What are some best practices you found in running this group as far as what makes for a good experience for the investor?
Absolutely. So I've been there for about a year, and my role has developed to manage the entire due diligence process. So we have a team that looks at sourcing the companies, and they bring in about 60 or 70 companies a month. And then it's my job to manage our team and take them down to about 6 or 7 companies that we actually want to put in front of investors. So one of the biggest things that I've found is being ahead of schedule. So we try and plan things out about 5 weeks in advance. So we just had our final screening meeting last week for our August event. So we like to be very much ahead of the game so that we're prepared and ready to go for our investors. And the other thing is really talking to the individual investors themselves. One thing that investors love is the personalized touch. And so at our events or via email or even just calling them up on the phone and asking them, what do you want to see more of? You know, we know that you've invested in, say, fintech recently. Do you want to see more of that? Or maybe you want to broaden your focus into agricultural technology or IoT or something like that. So really having that front-end focus on the investors and then feeding that back into the back end where we're selecting companies and saying, okay, we've got a lot of interest from our investors in this specific area, or our investors recently are looking for more monthly recurring revenue than they have been previously. Let's look at companies with that kind of traction. So really getting input from investors is, I think, one of the biggest things that you can do.
So that sounds great. I mean, investors are becoming increasingly narrow in their investment interests. You're a group of generalists. Do you see people coming in wanting, this group wants medical device, and that group wants consumer, and that group wants something else? And if so, how do you manage that process?
So we do see that. We see a lot of diversity in our interests, and I think that that's a good thing for us because we do look at such a wide range. But at the same time, there's a lot of other groups that we partner with. So we have partnerships, for example, with Canna Angels, who's also Bay Area based, and they're focused specifically on the marijuana and cannabis industry. So we not only do deal flow exchanges with them as far as, you know, if we get a company that we think they would be interested in, we'll pass that along to them. But we also refer our companies to investors in their groups. So we have close partnerships with people like Sandhill Angels or the Stanford Angel Network or Berkeley Angels, where if they're focused on a specific industry and that fund or that investment group has a very niche focus, and we have a company that fits that, we're very happy to encourage more collaboration in the industry and send that stuff their way. So, you know, even if a company doesn't necessarily fit our investment profile, we've got tons of partnerships, both globally and both nationally and internationally, that we can help them out to some extent.
And so on the entrepreneur side, you probably see a wide range of entrepreneurs coming through. What are some of the best practices you've seen from entrepreneurs coming in and pitching and working with your group?
That's a great question, and I think that one of the biggest things that I'd say right off the bat is the companies that do the best with us are the ones who listen to the advice that the people in the room are giving them. These people have been doing this for decades, right? Some of our top executives of the company have spent their whole life doing this kind of thing, whether it's on the investment side or the entrepreneurial side. And we get a lot of founders in who are just reluctant to make any changes, whether it's to how their business is operating or even just to how they're pitching their company to investors. What we try and do is we try and come at the company and their pitch style and their operations as, how would I evaluate this if I was an investor? What questions would I have? What concerns would I raise? And we bring those up through multiple rounds of screening, and a lot of companies just don't pay attention to that. You know, they say, okay, That's great that that's your opinion. I have a different one. And I think it's a hard balance because stubbornness as a founder is a very valuable trait because a lot of people say, this won't work, like you're not going to be able to make it. And you have to be able to push past that. But at the same time, be open to listening to advice from people that have been around the block before. And maybe they're not saying you can't make it, but they're saying, look, pivot in this way, and we think that'll be more applicable to investors. So definitely listening to the advice of others. I think one of the biggest things that we also see is working on your sales job, especially out here in the Bay Area with Bay Area focused companies. There's a lot of engineering talent on their team, but they don't necessarily do a good job of selling themselves. And that's what you have to do to get investor interest. And so some of the most successful companies that come through our door are the ones that can stand up there in front of 40 or 50 investors and really be able to convince them that they're the right choice for their money. So that's a huge value to have on your team.
How many investors do you have in your group, and how do you manage that group as far as there's a move to go online with a lot of these crowdfunding portals, AngelList, and the like, and there's always a balance between what's online and what you do in a group setting. How do you manage that? And by the way, how big is the group?
Yeah, so we have a large group of investors. We'd put it at around 70 or 80, but to be honest with you, not all of those are active all the time. So it's probably about 30 or 40 investors, specifically in the Bay Area, that we have active, and those are individual angel investors. So we also have a group of probably about 10 to 15 funds or accelerators or incubators who also come and look at our companies. So there's a lot of money in the room, as we like to call it. And yeah, you're absolutely right. You spoke earlier about how there's a trend to dealing with all of this online, and that's absolutely true. And we try and cater to that for our investors. Like I mentioned previously, not only do we hold these pitch events, but we also send out monthly updates on not only how the companies that we've shown them previously are doing, but also new companies that we have coming in that we're really excited about. And so making it more accessible from the investor's couch is a huge aspect of what we're trying to do. So we also set up, to that extent, Skype calls, or choose your internet meeting application of choice, whether it's Zoom or GoToMeeting or something like that. We set up teleconferences essentially between entrepreneurs and investors so that it can be still that face-to-face that you get when you're pitching, and that ability to have a back and forth, but also makes it a little more convenient for all parties involved. So that's an area that we're trying to grow and develop to, like you said, meet this changing dynamic of the industry.
So how do you select the deals that are going to make it to the main room for everyone to meet? You obviously get more deal flow than will fit into the time slots, so you have to pick and choose. How does your process work for screening and presenting?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got 4 stages in our process. We do an initial call with them, and that's about a 30-minute screening, and we essentially evaluate right off the bat at face value, are you a good fit for our company or not? If so, then we move you on to our due diligence round, where we have one of our excellent associates look at your company, look at your team, look at your traction, and really evaluate where you are as a company and what your potential is. From there, we schedule a 90-minute phone call with our head of operations, and also several associates typically join. And this is where I was talking about that we come at your company and your pitch as an investor. So, we sit you down for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and we have you pitch for us. And then, honestly, we poke holes in as many things as we can and say, okay, tell me about your go-to-market strategy. Tell me about your recruiting and employment strategy, and try to really not make them uncomfortable, but ask the tough questions. Because at the end of the day, those are the questions that investors are going to be asking. And so if you don't have answers to those, that's a red flag for us. You need to go back to the drawing board, think about that for a little bit, and then come back to us. So At that point, so that was the third stage, is that 90-minute meeting, and at that point we probably have, I'd say 15 to 20 companies of the 60 or 70 that started out. And then we narrow that down to our final screening meeting, which has about 10 companies, and of those 10, we pick about 6 or 7. So at the end of the day, we narrow it down to the top 10%. And in that final screening meeting, we do something very similar to the 90-minute meeting, but we bring in more voices. So we often partner with an accelerator or an incubator in the area. We hold it in their space. We try and do it in person if possible. And our founder, Roger King, is typically there to offer his advice to those companies. So we go through all 4 of those different stages before we truly narrow it down to the cream of the crop.
So that's a good explanation of how the group works. And you're the investment manager. What exactly do you use your role there, and how do you work with the group?
So I am kind of the organizational lead. I do some of the due diligence, and I do some of the the deep dives and the 90-minute screenings. But most of my role is to assign companies to our specific associates, because each one of our associates has a specialty, whether it's they've been in HR tech for a while, or we have a blockchain expert on our team. So really assigning the associates that'll provide the most healthy and accurate and knowledgeable evaluation to those companies, and then organizing the process, keeping everyone up to date on where we are, making sure that we do some quality assurance checks on those due diligences and making sure that everything's in order there. And at the end of the day, offering my final opinion on who I think the top companies are. It's a very collaborative process throughout, so everyone from the managing directors to myself to our associates all have fairly equal say in what companies we think are valuable or not. At the end of the day, there's a certain level of veto power that, say, Jordan, our head of operations, or Roger, our chief of people, have. But for the most part, it's a pretty collaborative effort, and I kind of oversee that entire process.
Sounds like a great process. So how many deals have you guys done in the group since you've been there?
So I've been here for about a year, and I'd say that we do on average about 1.5, probably a month, is invested in from our specific angel group. So Bay Angels member who is an angel investor. Now, that being said, we get probably on average another company a month who gets funding from someone we have referred them to. Like I mentioned earlier, we send them out to a bunch of different VCs or funds or things like that. So I'd say in my time here, we've probably done about 20 to 25 different deals.
Well, that's great. That's great. Have you had any exits to talk about yet?
So I haven't seen any exits. Unfortunately, since we're such an early stage group, you don't really see that payoff until 3 years down the road. But we have seen some pretty cool technologies roll through. We just had an AR VR company close their round, and that's mostly what we look for. Our success rate is measured by have they closed their rounds or not, and what percentage of the companies that we're putting in front of investors end up closing and moving on to the next step in their runway, or perhaps Series A or something like that. And so, yeah, we've had several companies go ahead and move on to further stages of their fundraising. The most recent one that we've seen is a company called Owleyes. They're AR, VR for tourist destinations. We're super excited about what they're doing. So, yeah, we've seen some pretty successful companies roll through.
Well, so you have a great process there and a good track record. What's the next step for you guys? Where do you think it's going to grow, or what processes will you be putting in place in the coming 12 months to increase the productivity and the returns to investors?
Great question. We have two main areas that we're focused on. One is expanding geographically, not only in the entrepreneur space, but also in the investor space. So we have a team of people right now focused on essentially recruiting, getting the word out there about Bay Angels, going to what we call underserved areas, where maybe there's a mismatch in funds to be invested or a mismatch in companies to be invested in. We see places like Lincoln, Nebraska, where there's a large, entrepreneurship hub there, but maybe there's less funds to be had. That would be an underserved area for us. We think other communities such as Austin, Texas, near you guys, or Raleigh, North Carolina, are also, they're booming. They're huge. There's some great stuff going on there. And so we'd like to expand out into those areas a little bit more. So that's our first main initiative. And the second main initiative I mentioned a little bit earlier, and that is we're going to try and start raising a fund for Bay Angels. So look for that in the coming 12 months or so.
So when you expand to other areas, how does that work? Is it a pitch session in the local area, or are those guys in that area like Nebraska going to the Bay Area to pitch to the main group?
So a lot of it is what we talked about earlier, where you were mentioning there's this trend of doing things online. That's absolutely what we're trying to do to penetrate a little bit into those markets. And then once we're a little more established, that's when we can start, holding events. I think one of our top areas that we're focusing on holding a pitch event is probably the Tampa, Florida area. And part of it is due not only to the potential of those areas, but also our connections and our resources out there. So we happen to have some team members down in LA, we have some team members out in Florida, and we have some team members out in the Dubai area. And so getting to a point where we can start to hold events out there is definitely on our roadmap. But I think initially it's mostly about spreading the word, getting investors on board, getting entrepreneurs to maybe fly out from those areas to the Bay Area and pitch for our investors here. So those are a couple ways that we're looking to really penetrate those markets.
Well, that sounds great. Well, that's a good rundown of the group and what you guys are doing. It sounds like you've got a great process and things are moving along very well. Thank you. Did you have anything else you wanted to add based on what you guys are doing there to the audience?
Yeah, I just encourage any investors, if you'd like to get in contact with Bay Angels, whether you're an investor or an entrepreneur looking to raise money or invest in upcoming exciting companies, please do get in contact with us. Go to bayangels.com or email bayangels@bayangels. And if you'd like to get in touch with me personally, it's austinc@bayangels.com. Would really look forward to talking to people in the Texas area or anywhere else domestically, internationally. We're really excited about what we're doing here, and we think we provide a strong value add to the community as a whole.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you for sharing that information today. Appreciate you coming on and spending time with us, and hopefully we'll get some more deals out to where you guys are. It sounds like a great process and a great program.
That'd be fantastic. Thanks so much, Hall.